Good morning. Thanks for coming with me as I walk the pie trainer field in North Park. I made a pretty startling discovery here along this trail. Been walking by it for years and I finally spotted it. It's like a miracle. Whenever you look at travel magazines, especially out west, there's usually one photograph of a beautiful horizon with a rock sticking out and a tree growing out of the rock. Well, I finally found something very similar here in North Park, and I often wondered, how does that happen? You know, how can a tree grow out of a rock? So join with me as I walk to this rock, and it's off to the left here. So I have to look at the video camera and also try to find this little path that goes off to the left. Fortunately, I put DEET on, so not am I avoiding COVID, but I'm also avoiding all the other ticks and mosquitoes that would also like to give me a virus. And I'm almost there. Good, I made it up the bank. And if you notice straight ahead of me, these rocks laying on the ground. I mean, they're just literally laying on the ground, not sticking out of the ground. And often, always in amazement, where did these rocks come from? And I know from school, people say, oh, the glaciers did it, the glaciers did it. And I guess that's true. But if we go off here and you look to my right, after I get past these tick-bearing weeds, you'll see a boulder that I never noticed until I decide one day to look to my left off to the trail. It's a huge boulder just laying here on the ground, and it's covered with moss. And I think the boulder is a sedimentary rock made of limestone and sulfur and silt. And if you notice the horizontal cracks, it's probably something like shale or limestone. And it's pretty well beaten by the weather. But you know what's amazing about this sedimentary rock? There's a tree growing out of it, like I was telling you about in the travel magazines. And it's not a little thing. I mean, the tree's monstrous. Look, it goes about 40 feet in the air. It's alive and healthy, has branches, and produces leaves every year. And if I go over here to my left, look at the root system. I mean, if the sun will let you see it. Look at the roots traveling over the rocks. And it's a huge boulder. And finally the roots make it down into the soil. Well, when this tree started to grow, I mean, it didn't have those roots. As a matter of fact, it probably looked a lot like another tree growing out of this boulder. This one's even more amazing. It's a younger tree, but it is literally growing out of the side of the rock. And it only has 2 roots. Looks like a third one tried to grow, but it gave up. Unfortunately, the shade is preventing you from seeing how awesome it is. But it is also tall and grows up. It's healthy with leaves. So, how do you get a tree to grow out of a side of a rock? And especially this one with very few roots. Well, there's a theory called succession. And this boulder here is an excellent example, because you can see there's moss and lichen growing on this rock. So the moss and lichen, they go through their life cycle and they die depending on the weather and conditions, and they decompose, and then maybe some leaves fall down and they drop down on the rock and into the cracks and crevices, and they decompose. And could be a bird's flying along and its droppings containing seeds will plant some weeds and grasses, and they grow up and they go through their cycle and they decompose, and now you have built up material on the rock. And then at some point, when you have enough, you have a bush that can grow on this rock. As a matter of fact, there may be another tree, a third tree growing out of this very fertile rock. So how do you get from rocky material, sand, silt, lime, calcium, to grow into something that's fibrous, like wood? It's almost like a miracle. Now you're going to say, well, you just explained it all to me. How can it be a miracle? Well, the part that amazes me is look at the volume of roots, the tree trunk, all the branches, the leaves that grow every year are coming out of this little deposit of decomposed material. And of course, this tree is cheating a little bit. It grew enough roots to make it into the ground. But the one on the other side is literally growing out of the side of the rock. And it had to have taken years before this tree had the benefit of this root system. So the whole thing is just totally amazing to me. And I had read on Facebook, if you do a search called Geology of North Park, they explain that this park started to grow about 300 million years ago. And the park is basically a buildup of sedimentary materials dropping out of various lakes that flowed over this park. And you have layers of shale, limestone, and there's even coal. There's a Duquesne seam that's way down, which tells us this was a forest once before lakes came back again. And then there's also the Wildwood mine that was mined here in the upper levels of this park. So now we have all these lakes coming in, and they drop their materials and form all these beautiful, nice, neat layers of material. And then 1.5 million years ago, a glacier covered this area. And it was all of eastern United States was covered with this glacier. So the glacier starts to melt. And through the glacier movements and picking up rocks as it went along, this is probably one of them. And so the glacier melts, and with a substantial amount of water flowing and the tumbling of the boulders off of the park, the glacier actually carved up this nice even layers of material. They got about as high as the Pie Trainer Field or the swimming pool, and eroded out this park in the looser materials and gouged out ravines and valleys. So now we have this really cool park to walk around in that's three-dimensional instead of a flat plane. So the whole concept to me is a miracle. So we get the benefit from 3 million years of work, and also this miracle here of the tree growing out of the rock. So I gave you enough clues as to where this is at. And I'm going to give you some food for thought. What if God gave you a box of cake mix? We'll call it double chocolate chunk cake mix. And he tells you, okay, I want spaghetti from this. So now you're stuck. What do you do? How am I going to pull this off? But God says you have 1,000,000 years to work it out. Well, that's the way I look at this whole process. So that's food for thought, and have a good day. Bye.